Welcome to this exercise on the topic of time to consumer or the calculation of payoff periods. Here we have two versions of a product. The original product, which yields revenues of 4.5 million per year and has variable costs of 40% of the revenues. Development is considered to take 700 man-months at a cost of 8,500 per month. And the market cycle for this version is forecasted to last for 13 years. Then we have the follow-up version 2, which has a developing time of 20% longer than the original product, but cost per month would decrease by 10%. So the 700 would increase by 20%, so it has to be multiplied by 1.2, but the cost would decrease by 10%, so have to be multiplied with a factor of 0.9. Additionally, we know the market cycle is estimated to last only 10 years for this product, but revenues are to be assumed 20% higher than the original product, so we can multiply this value here with 1.2. Our task then, determine the payoff periods for both versions. Well, let's start with this. Just copying first for version 1 the relevant information. I'm going to put this into a table. We can start with the first line. Here we have 4.5 million per year. So I put this here in one column per year. And over here I have the overall project costs, project or overall market cycle costs. So I have to multiply the revenues with 13 to get here. 13 because the market cycle is forecast to last 13 years. Well, if I have the revenues, I can just multiply them with 0.4, giving me the variable costs. And if I subtract variable costs from revenues, I get the contribution margin. Similarly, I can multiply them with 13, giving me the total values. Then I have to go to fixed costs, or in our case, fixed costs are determined solely via development costs. So our development costs are described here in this sentence. So we have 700 man-month at a cost of 8,500 per month. So we just have to multiply 700 with 8,500, giving us here the overall fixed cost, the overall development costs. And I put them here at this side for whole project period because they arise only once. So that's the value fixed cost for the whole project. Dividing them by 13 gives me the respective per annum value of the fixed costs. So it's just a distribution of fixed costs over all the years of the market cycle. Well, if I have fixed costs and contribution margins on both sides, I can calculate my profits. And since I do not have any additional information, I can assume that the cash flow each year and in total equals the contribution margin. So with this information, it's quite easy and straightforward to calculate the payoff periods, because that's the money I get every year. That's something like a theoretical debt position. So to pay off the full fixed costs, full development costs, I have to simply divide them by the cash flows, and I get how many years I have to pay off to get them fully done, fully erased. So in other words, after 2.2 years, I have earned enough money, which I can spend, to fully pay back my development costs. In other words, I reached the break-even point in my product lifecycle. Well, that's for the first version of the product. Now we can consider the second version as well. That's the information for the second version. I copied as a reference basis the information for the first product as well. Now we're going to introduce these informations into another table. First off, here we have a market cycle of 10 years. So all of this is based on 10 years. It starts with changes in developing time and cost per month of developing. So all of these two changes apply to the fixed costs. Well, as I said, developing time 20% longer, so we multiply fixed costs with 1.2, 1 plus 20%. But cost per month decreased by 10%, so we also multiply it with 0.9. So have to multiply this with the two multipliers, 1.2 and 0.9, giving me here the new fixed cost, the new costs of development for the whole period. Dividing them by the 10-year estimated market cycle gives me the per annum value of the fixed costs. Then I get the information revenues of the follow-up product are assumed to be 20% higher. So I multiply revenues with 1.2 as well, giving me this value per year times 10 for the whole horizon. Again, I do not have any information on the variable costs, so I can assume, relatively speaking, they stay the same. So I just use the same multiplier for variable costs I used here on this as well. Subtract variable costs from revenues, giving me the contribution margin. Subtracting the previously discussed fixed costs, giving me the profit per year and in total. Again, I do not have any additional information, so I can assume that contribution margin and cash flows are identical here. So again, I'm going to divide fixed costs by cash flows. And in this case, I get a value slightly below 2. So in this case, we can see even though costs increased in price, development increased in time necessary for it, and overall costs increased even though per month costs decreased. Even though the overall development costs have increased, I can pay this off much earlier because I also generate higher revenues. And well, that's done about it on this exercise. I say goodbye and see you next time.